I think
Yeah.
if you look at it from our like today, right? Like information has never been more accessible than it's been, right? So I mean, I think at the end of the day, all it really takes for you to pick up a new habit or learn something new is really just the time and investment, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, I wouldn't say aren't willing to do that, but I think like that's really all it takes. And I think you can easily Google, hey, like how to do X, Y, and Z, and you have like 30 to 40 different beginner aimed content for you to kind of consume and start your journey, right?
Is it a tech podcast? Well, technically, yes. This is the show for current and future techies who are curious about exploring the world of tech. You'll get to hear from exciting guests, highlighting the diversity of roles and careers within the space, how you can get started, but also the life that comes along with it before, during, and after. My name is Stella, and this is the Technically Yes podcast. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Technically Yes podcast. I'm your host, Stella, and I am really excited about today's episode. I have a really good friend of mine joining us today, and we're going to be digging a little bit more into his story, what he's kind of working on right now, and yeah, what he sees for himself going forward. So thanks so much for joining me today, Hamid.
No, thanks for having me, Stella. I know we've been trying to get this nailed down for the last couple months, too close to a year. So happy to finally be
Something
speaking
like
to
that.
you and chatting.
Yeah, no, I'm super happy to have you here. Yeah, it's definitely been a long time coming, but good things come to those who wait. So, super excited to have you here. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Hamid. Introduce yourself to my listeners. And yeah, what are you currently doing in the tech space?
Ooh, we I always love these questions in regards to introduce yourself, especially on interviews, because you're just like, where do I start? But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say I see myself as a creative working in a tech space. If I was to backtrack my career, I started out originally in journalism, where I worked in that space for about 2.5 years, focusing on news writing. After that, I ended up working in media relations communications for another year and a half, 2 years. Following that, I'm like, hey, this isn't for me. Let me try my hand at marketing. So I ended up like doing that for about 2 years. And after that, and what I'm currently in is sales. So I've been doing that, Jesus, since 2016, and tech sales or sales in the tech space, which has been interesting. I know last two to 3 years, I focused specifically on cybersecurity sales, which is a beast in of itself. But yeah, I think that should kind of highlight, I guess, in my own personal endeavors. Yeah, I think a tinkerer slash somebody that enjoys kind of playing around with things as well as kind of learning new things on the go.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like that's almost like an understatement for you, to be completely honest. But no, I love that because you and I, we actually met at a company both doing tech sales.
Mhm.
So I dabbled in that for a little bit. Wasn't quite my thing, but you did pretty well with that. So for those who don't really know what that entails, would you mind explaining a little bit what that means or what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's in a tech space, I mean, titles are pretty just imaginary slash made up. But
Yeah.
most tech sales role, depending on the organization, um, could mean a number of different things. Either like business development, so doing outreach to clients to kind of build up business. You could be doing account management, so managing the existing book of business, or essentially customer success, right? So post-sale support as well as kind of supporting customers on their journey. The type of sales that me and Stella did at it was an IT reseller here in Toronto. Um, we essentially did the entire shebang. So we did business development, account management, customer support. Typically within tech sales, you would work with an expanded team. So your role ideally would be to just focus on the tech side or on the sales side, and then you would work with a technical counterpart who would know the speeds and feeds of technology. So it really allows you to kind of hone in and kind of develop your sales skills, as well as if you naturally gravitate towards a certain technology or solution in the marketplace, to kind of take the initiative to learn more about it, right? So yeah, I'd say, uh, I mean, for me, like that experience was kind of my first foray into like real sales. I
Yeah.
know prior to that I did like door to door, which is absolute just fucking savagery.
Yeah.
But yeah, tech sales is definitely I think where it's at.
Nice. That's awesome. I think you're actually the first person that I've had on the platform that does tech sales. I'm really happy to have this conversation because I usually tell a lot of people that are looking to break into the tech space that
Hmm.
tech sales is a really good route to take if you have if you have those, well, one, if you can acquire those technical skills as you go, because everything's taught on the job.
Yep.
But most importantly, if you're passionate about sales, right? We have seen, I mean, the company that we used to work at, we've seen some insane success stories and people that are just like crazy, crazy good at what they do. So there's a lot of opportunity, right? Like you see some people in the tech sales space making like upwards $250,000 a year,
Yeah.
which sounds very, ridiculous in some cases. But when you look at the numbers don't lie, right?
Hmm.
So it definitely is possible. So for someone that would be looking to get into tech sales, where would you suggest they start?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think tech sales is probably one of the best, if not easiest, ways to get into tech, right? And I'd imagine as conversation goes along, we could kind of talk about exploring opportunities outside of that. But I think most tech sales role will kind of start out on that business development role opportunity, and a lot of what that is doing just outreach, right? You're essentially the first person that's picking up the phone and reaching out to cold prospects, and I mean, to be honest, it sounds hard and crazy, but I mean, like as we've seen with the training that we had, um, like there's really no prerequisite, right? Like as long as you're willing to kind of put in the energy and put in the effort and willing to learn, like you can excel at anything. So yeah, I'd say business development role is definitely, I think, one of the easiest roles to get, as well as kind of the first step into the industry.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I completely agree. What would you say are some of the hardest challenges for someone working in tech sales?
I'd say
What are
probably
some of the
keeping up with
biggest
technology,
challenges?
right? I mean, as we've seen, I mean, technology just changes year to year, right? So, I
Yeah,
mean, I know one of the things I've seen in probably some of the greatest performers is just the initiative to consistently learn, as well as consistently kind of challenge yourself. I think one of the other challenges, I think this is probably like in any sales role, is really just not getting complacent, right? I mean, I think there's a certain ounce of, oh, like all my deals have come through. I'm making all this great money. I could just kind of take my foot off the pedal, right? Which I think is probably one of the greatest errors any salesperson can make. But yeah, I'd say probably those two is probably one of the biggest challenges.
yeah,
Um, I mean, if you look at it from like a second order challenge, I mean, I think learning as well as kind of networking has probably been a huge challenge for a lot of salespeople. I mean, you would think salespeople are amazing, but I mean, I think a lot of what the tech industry has kind of taught me from a sales perspective is networking is so important. I mean, both from a customer perspective as well as from a peer perspective, right? Because you never know where the next opportunity is going to come from. You never know 5 to 10 years down the road whether somebody that used to do business here kind of does business at another company trying to break into. So I'd say networking is definitely, I think, a huge challenge, and I think it's something that a lot of people might not consider until it's too late, right?
yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I could definitely see that. I find like with sales, sales is a grind, right?
Yeah.
You definitely have to show up wholeheartedly every single day. You have to be willing to put in the time and the hours. There's systems in place in order to produces success ultimately when it comes
Hmm.
to sales. I used to work in real estate sales, um, moving into tech sales, things like that. You do really notice that the activities is what makes you successful. And once you are able to, stick to that, whether you're like on a dialer or whether you're doing, whether you're reaching out via email, things like that. So it can be like mundane tasks, but
Yep.
it's definitely those tasks that ends up, yeah, yielding results, right? You just have to sort of stick at it. So yeah, I see what you mean in that regard. Now, on the side, you are saying that you are working on some stuff as well. So outside of like the tech sales, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, and I think this kind of leads into what I mentioned earlier of kind of always being interested in kind of learning new things as well as kind of taking initiative to kind of do interesting things outside of your role, right? And I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
somewhat blessed in the fact that I had the opportunity at my last company, which was a startup. Great things working at a startup as well as kind of a lot of negatives, but I had the ability to kind of do anything I was interested in, right? And I had the support of my manager, where if I came to her and was like, hey, like I wanna do X, Y, and Z, she's like, cool, just go do it. And I'm like, okay. Which kind of works really well as I've always kind of been some of a self-starter slash as a curious George. So one of
Yeah.
the projects that I've been working on in the last couple of months is just kind of upgrading as well as kind of learning about networking, which has kind of naturally led to me building out a uh, storage device, as well as now me slowly kind of learning about storage as well as kind of utilizing containers and Docker. So yeah, it's been a consistent journey of, oh shit, maybe I should learn about this. Oh shit, this is interesting. Oh, maybe I should spend a couple hours here. So yeah, I think I mean, working in tech, I think you're constantly exposed to so much interesting things that you could kind of somewhat get lost in the sauce. But I think a large portion of it, and I think what I've learned from my own journey is I typically will learn something as I need it, or essentially if it's on the next part of the journey, right? And I think that's kind of made it easier to small chunk, as well as kind of made it more easy to kind of really take on a project, right? Versus being like, I need to learn anything, I need to learn everything, kind of having analysis paralysis, right?
Nice. Yeah, no, I love that. And it's so, what I do love about the tech space is that a lot of this is available to us, right? So, like, for
Yeah.
example, you want to pick up a new skill, you want to learn about Docker, you can go online and learn about Docker. It's not like you have to wait 6 months, you don't have to enroll in this program, go to
Cool.
school, etc. Everything is available to you online. So, with learning this, well, first of all, what is Docker? If you were to put in like super simple terms.
I'd say it's pretty much just Jesus, I'm still learning about. I mean, funny enough, a Kufu at can explain it a lot easier. But I mean, I'd say it's pretty much just a SaaS solution. So it provides a platform for you to run applications, in particular applications in the cloud.
Yeah.
That might not be the right definition, but it's just the kind of the way I understand it. And I think this is kind of just in regards to that learning process, right? I think one thing that I've done really well is always try to understand things in the way I think of them, right? Um, and I know to your second point, in regards to just accessibility of the information. I know one of the things that I actually really admired about you was when you first sought out to learn about code as well as kind of get into more of the programming side. You kind of took an initiative to seek out mentors as well as kind of take different courses as well as kind of look at YouTube videos, right? And I think
Yeah.
if you look at it from our like today, right? Like information has never been more accessible. There's a girl lights just turning on.
Yeah, I love
More
it.
accessible than it's been, right? So I mean, I think at the end of the day, all it really takes for you to pick up a new habit or learn something new is really just the time and investment, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, I wouldn't say aren't willing to do that, but I think like that's really all it takes. And I think you can easily Google, hey, like how to do X, Y, and Z, and you have like 30 to 40 different beginner aimed content for you to kind of consume and start your journey, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, there's so much out there. And it's like you said, depending on where you are at in your journey, whether you're beginner, intermediate, advanced, I mean, there's information out there.
Hmm.
And yeah, it really just comes down to like how much do you want to learn and how badly do you want to learn it and in what's your sort of time frame, right?
Yep.
I definitely gave myself a specific time frame for myself, but I know some people that are, very passive when it comes to this stuff and are learning here and there. But it's like what they do, those consistent activities, once
Hmm.
again, it's very similar with sales, just those consistent activities over time will result in something eventually. Um, so thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it was definitely a journey, and I mean, I couldn't be more grateful because it led me here.
Yep.
Now, with these sort of side projects that you're working on, is that just like simply a hobby that you're doing on the side, or do you want to then sort of implement that and potentially like monetize or kind of bleed that into your career? What does that look like?
Good question. I mean, to be honest, I haven't really thought of it
Hmm.
that deeply. I mean, for me, I think a lot of what every side project has kind of been sparked by curiosity as well as kind of wanting to learn something. I mean, the
Yeah.
networking project itself was kind of sparked by my hate of SaaS subscription platforms and kind of
Mm.
subscription content that we've been forced to adopt in this day and age. So very much like Netflix, Spotify, and other platforms that pretty much all subscription based, and I think the ownership of media is so important of content, right? Where back in the day you could buy a DVD and that's yours forever, right? Where I
Yeah.
think now we're paying what, $25 for Netflix, and we really don't have ownership of that content where Netflix could just remove a show that we want to watch and we no longer have access to it, right? So I
Yeah.
think a lot of what my side projects have been has been either me being like, I hate this, I'm gonna change it, or essentially me kind of just learning about something new and being like, oh, this is cool. Let me throw some time and energy into this.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it's like you said, everyone's hands in our pocket, right?
Yeah.
And I find even with a lot of the solutions and like projects that I work on, like a lot of
Hmm.
times we can add in like extensions, plugins, things like that. And they'll be like, $5 a month, $10, what have you. But a lot of this stuff, like if you learn it, you can build it yourself.
Yeah.
So it's just a solution that's on a platform. They want you to enter the subscription, which is huge now and it's great for businesses. But like
Hmm.
when it comes down to your pocket, right, or your bottom dollar, so to speak, there are definitely other ways to go about it. So like yeah, learning the skills definitely is very helpful for sure.
Yeah, and I think also in longevity, right? I mean, it's somewhat interesting. Like I think what was it last year when there's like a major internet outage here in
Yes,
Toronto,
that was terrible.
and nobody had access to internet, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
was I was good because I had all my content on my laptop, right? So I was able to still
Mm.
watch movies. I was able to still stream shows. I was still able to like listen to music. I was still able to listen to podcasts, right? And I think it's situations like that where it really shows you the importance of actually owning content, right? And I think owning the media that you pay for, right? Because I think it
Right.
definitely adds up, right? It's like you're paying $25 a month for the subscription here, but like you can buy a DVD for what, like 5, $10 at like garage sales, and like that's yours forever, right? And I think it's just,
Yeah.
and as I get older, I just think of it in regards to like the value you get for what you pay for, right? And I think, yeah, learning about tech and I think learning how accessible it is and learning about it more, it kind of does make you somewhat, I won't say jaded, but it makes you, I think, consider, I think, your technological footprint as well as kind of the ownership at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but I think it's like if you do with that information and you utilize it for the betterment of yourself or whatever, even if it's technology that you're working on and building, I definitely feel like it could be beneficial. But yeah, I totally see what you mean.
Yep.
Yeah, because I find myself even, sometimes I go down rabbit holes because most of the things are open source. And when I say
Yep.
open source means that, the code and the technology and how it was built is available to the public generally.
Yep.
So you have access to view everything, things like that. So a lot of times when I see myself like leaning towards going for like a subscription, I'm like, let me look at this and see how it's built and see if I can manage at least like one aspect for myself. Because usually, like, when you're doing add ons and stuff like that, there's like 10 different solutions, but you're only using the one, right?
Yep.
Um, so it is kind of like, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It can create a little bit more work, but at least we have the knowledge, so to speak. Um, so I'm curious, with everything you know so far, having been in the textile space for quite some time, knowing what the industry is like, is there anything that you would do differently now that you have sort of all the information? Like, what would you say to your younger self?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I probably would have studied computer science university instead of doing a liberal arts degree. I mean, just for the simple fact that it would give me such a head start to ending up in the tech industry.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, aside from that, I mean, to be honest, I'd probably ask a lot more questions as well as kind of pick a pony a little early on, right? I know when we were working at the IT reseller, I mean, I was somewhat of a generalist, but I think as you look upon like your sales tech progression, I mean, typically you do kind of become somewhat of a you do kind of pick a specialization, right? And I think I
yeah,
definitely would have picked a specialization a lot sooner, um, as well as I definitely would have networked a lot more. I mean, I think this is probably just a young person's uh, what do you call it? Dream of things will kind of just work out if I keep being successful. I think, yeah, I think what really makes of what I've seen, what really makes like a great performer from like a person who's subpar is really just kind of their ability to network as well as kind of stay consistent, right? I think we kind of spoke a little bit to what I call the grunt work of consistency, of doing some of the things that you might not really enjoy, right? I think cold calling for like 2 hours a day where you just get rejected 90% of the time is not fun, right? But I think those small habits definitely lead to consistent success over the long period, right? And I think
Yeah.
also kind of having a a long-term view of success, right? And I think what success means to me versus what it means to my peers, right? I mean, we definitely made a lot of money, right? But at the end of the day, I think money isn't the only measure of success, right? And I think for me has really always kind of been of, am I learning something new? Am I being challenged? And I think kind of focusing more on that, I think would be probably, yeah, I think one of the key things I probably would have changed early on in my career.
Nice, nice. I like that. I like that. That's very good. I mean, I'm huge. I'm so big on networking.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. Even as much as I do network, even so, I look back and I'm like, wow, I wish I attended this thing, or
Mhm.
I wish I put a little bit more effort into networking within like this industry or this vertical, etc. So I do think it's one of those things that most of us can definitely turn up a notch. And yeah, just be mindful as we're kind of going through the process. Because it is very easy to just kind of leave it to the universe or to
Yeah.
God and be like, yeah, you know what, things are going to work out. It's going to be great. But yeah, put that effort in, right? What can you do? What are those like little things that you can do, even if it's just like looking up, like even today I was looking up events to post in a Facebook group of mine. Just because I'm like, even though I am happy with where I'm at, things are going well, it's never a bad time to network. So speaking of that, what does that look like for you in terms of networking events? Like, do you go to bigger conferences? Are you kind of just like meeting up with smaller groups, or yeah, what does that look
Yeah, I
like?
mean, to be honest, the way I think of networking is kind of break up within three different circles, right? I think of networking within peers, right? So kind of staying in
Yeah,
contact with some of the people I worked with. Um, and I think the second one would be kind of networking with customers, right? So
yeah,
essentially, keeping in contact with all the customers. And I mean, like, and I think there's this kind of generalization, I think misconception in regards to networking, right? I mean, networking doesn't need to be this thing where like I'm calling you every week and be like, hey, how are things? Hey, how's the family? There, there, there. Like I think
yeah,
like I think for me, I think what it means is really just caring about the people, right? And I think just kind of being curious and kind of genuinely reaching out, right? And I think for me, like it could be if the relationship is super strong, it could be like sending an email once a month or so once a quarter, being like, hey, how are things? I've thought of you. Or maybe even like once a year to be like, yo, like how are things? I read this about the company on Google. So yeah, like I think a lot of it is just kind of keeping on top of things.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think for that third bucket would kind of be just networking in general within my industry, right? And I think all three kind of have different motions. So one
yeah,
could be, let's for example, going to like a sales conference where I know other salespeople will be there, and then kind of just grabbing cards and adding them on LinkedIn. For customers, essentially just keep in contact with them, kind of setting up different kind of touch points. And I think for the industry one, yeah, just attending any sort of conference or any sort of industry event that's happening within my city. So yeah, like I think networking is definitely super important. And I think for me, and I learned this at my old spot, was the CEO just had a Rolodex of every cybersecurity individual in the city, and I think it was crazy to see for me to be, hey, I'm like, yo, do you know X, Y, and Z at this company? He's like, yeah, like I used to play basketball with him like 10 years ago, and I'm like, "Ooh,
nice,
well, okay, this is okay, sure, and get introduced that way, and then like this happened like 15 to 20 times, and it became so ridiculous to see just how wide his network was as well as kind of really overlay the importance of it to me because like this guy's working like 14-hour days, 16-hour days, right? So he's not going to all these social events. He's not doing all this, right? But I think just through his genuine interest in people and his genuine care, like he was able to kind of maintain as well as grow all these networks. And I think like he's seen it from his success, right? Like he's led as well as kind of had quite a few high profile jobs, right? So I think it's definitely I think one of the hugest contributors to your career long term because I mean people people work with people who they like, right, and who they know, right,
Yeah.
versus people that they don't know, right? And I think if you're, especially me in this position right now, where I'm currently looking for my next role, I mean, yeah, like my network has been phenomenal in regards to just like letting me know, kind of, hey, like they're hiring here. If you need a word, just let me know, and I'm like, oh, that'll be
Yeah.
amazing, right? So, yeah, like I think networking is plays such a pivotal role in your career, whether it's with customers, peers, or finding next opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to know about mentorship for you, because networking is one portion of it,
Yeah,
but mentorship sort of falls under the same umbrella, but it is quite different. Do
yeah.
you have someone when it comes to mentorship, someone you can turn to, whether it's someone within the industry or outside?
Yes, I mean, ahead of this us talking, I was kind of just thinking of mentorship because for me, like I don't think of mentorship as this thing of you having like a sensei and like available to you whenever you want to chat with them, right? Like I think of
Yeah.
mentors as anybody that is better in a particular skill set that I want to learn more or essentially want to invest more of my time in, right? So
Yeah.
for me, I think mentors, like I've had quite a lot, and it's been interesting, right? Because I mean, it might be somebody that I've known for a while, and I'm like, hey, like, do you have time to kind of connect? I just have a couple questions in regards to that, and then they'll give me like out of a 45-minute conversation, they'll give me like two nuggets, and I'm like, oh, I'm so thankful for it, and I might never speak to them again, right? So I think mentors for me have kind of been there's either like the short period or kind of the long period. I mean, I think one thing that I've done really well and kind of showcased really well is my initiative to want to learn, and I think you're never going to find a mentor or somebody that's willing to kind of invest in you if you're not willing to kind of demonstrate that, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's like the old adage, right? That when you're ready, a mentor present himself, right? And I think a lot of what that is just kind of showing up and fumbling about, and being willing to kind of ask people, because I mean I think everybody, and this is my belief, I think everybody inherently is good, right? And everybody wants to help other people, and I think if you go about and you're posting, hey, like I'm trying to learn X, Y, and Z, and you kind of document it, whether it's on LinkedIn or YouTube. I mean, people
Yeah.
want to help, right? They'll point you in the right direction. They'll point you to like an expert, right? So I
Yeah.
think a lot of it is just doing the initial kind of legwork and kind of asking around, right? Asking questions.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I like that you said that too, that it doesn't have to be like this master that you
Yeah,
go to, right? You can definitely find mentorship within your friends, someone that
yeah,
has like different skill sets, things like that. So I think even the way we sort of view mentorship also should change,
yeah,
especially within the tech space, because I find like there's so much talent out there, it's insane. And because information is so readily available, you do have specialists within almost every facet of the industry
yeah,
within your network. So you'd be surprised how much people actually know. But it's like you said, showing up with that effort, with that like willingness to learn is also really important because people want to invest in you, right? And also when it comes to working, like I'm constantly looking in my network when I see job postings at my company and things like that because it's like you said, we want to work with people we like and people
yeah.
that we know are driven and people that want to be there. So I completely agree. So yeah, thanks for that. Curious with the tech space, we always talk about the perks, right? I mean, whether we're in like the job search, we're looking to see like what benefits does this company have. Like it's so much more than just a salary when it comes
Yeah.
to jobs, right? With tech. What are some of the perks that you've encountered being in the tech space?
Oh, I mean, like I think the tech space is somewhat unique in the fact that like the perks are better than any other industry I've worked in. And when I say that, that typically you'll get like free lunch, you'll get like different vendor um, gifts. I mean, like I got this from my old workplace, right? Like a
Yeah,
60 to
yeah,
$70 like Yeti cooler. So like I
yeah,
think perks, and I think there, I'm gonna answer this in two ways. I think early on in my career, for me, the perks were definitely, I think, the highlight in the fact that I was getting all this like company branded merchandise. I was essentially having those cast days where we get drinks every Friday of the month. So, I mean, I think the perks are definitely, I think, one of the highlights. I think as I matured in my career, I think for me, the perks don't really play that high of a importance. And I think for me, what I value is kind of that work-life balance as well as kind of how much education as well as kind of self-investment is a company willing to kind of invest in me, as well as kind of having access to people who are way smarter than me that are willing to kind of help me as well as kind of teach me on my journey. So yeah, like I think perks are definitely unique in the tech industry, and I think a lot of what that's going to be in regards to value to you is really kind of what you value, right? And I think like if you ask me, like I have like 30 merchandise backpacks. Like I don't need another backpack or a water
Yeah.
bottle, right?
Nope.
Whereas like if I'm able to get like $1,000 for like a course or something I'm interested in, right? Like that would mean a lot more to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think it's definitely one that everybody needs to ask themselves, right?
Yeah.
'Cause yeah, nobody like, and it's interesting, right? Like I know there's memes all through the pandemic when everyone was working remote of like all those perks were gone, right? So I think like all those like pizza days, all those like merchandise things were gone, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, this job kind of sucks without that.
Yeah.
Um, so I think those definitely can be somewhat of like a hindrance in regards to you generally understanding kind of the value the company has as well as kind of the career progression in your career.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I think at the end of the day, it's really like you shouldn't just base a job based off of the perks and the fact they have free lunch, because yeah, like they might be taking advantage of you otherwise, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like stay vigilant, right?
Yeah.
And it is funny that you say that because it's true. Like, who is this company without all of this like glitter all
Yeah.
around, right? Without all of these like distractions and things like that. Because I know like the company we worked at, like we were like always out, like whether it was
Yeah.
like lunch, happy hour, after hour, like there was always something going on that was
Mhm.
company sponsored. But yeah, it's like you said, once all of that sort of dies down, when you enter a pandemic, like who is your company, what are the values attached to the company, do they care about you and your personal development, things like that. So it's very much assessing where you're at in your career and sort of
Mhm.
like exactly how you said, like how does this benefit me, right? Because for
Yeah.
someone getting free lunch every day is like that is what they need at that
Yeah.
moment. So you just have to figure out, yeah, where do you kind of fall within your needs, so to say. I'm going to pause the episode right there. I hope you're loving it as much as I am. It's been an honor to have Hamid on the pod, and we got into some really cool discussions. And it just went a little bit longer than I'd anticipated. So I decided to break this episode up into two parts. So stay tuned for part 2 of the episode with Hamid coming next week. Talk to you then. Thank you so much for tuning into the Technically Yes podcast. If you like today's episode, rate this podcast 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you would like to get in touch with me, reach out to me on Instagram at the Tech Yes Pod, and find me and subscribe on YouTube by looking up the Technically Yes podcast. Thanks again, and chat to you guys next week.